We are so pleased and thrilled to have the opportunity to bring the Association of Community College Trustees Governance Institute for Student Success here. The focus, as you know, is student success, but from the perspective of community college trustees. We here at the Council have been diligently working on student success from a multitude of areas, from faculty involvement to administration involvement, and clearly, in order to kind of bring this full circle, we must have trustee involvement in student success, and in order to really kind of bring that knowledge base up a level and broadly up a level, we wanted to bring the Governance Institute for Student Success here to make that happen. It's been a very successful program. It has been brought to Florida, Ohio, I believe Washington State, if I'm not mistaken, Nevada as well, and has had resounding success. So we're very excited to have the opportunity to present this here to you all, and we certainly encourage maximum participation. Please soak up as much of this information as possible, ask questions, bring it back to your local boards, and we are operating here under the kind of the axiom that a rising tide lifts all boats. And so we're very pleased to have this, and I thank you again for participating today. With that said, I'd like to also make mention of two student speakers who are going to be here with us, and I believe Larry in a moment will talk a little bit more about them. But they are Ashley Castiglia, as well as Dia Sanders. Are they here? Hello. Let's give them a round of applause for participating. I wanted to just very briefly introduce you to the two folks, the experts in the field, who are going to be guiding us through this afternoon's ceremonies. The first is Dr. Byron McClenny. Dr. McClenny is the Director of Student Service Initiatives at the University of Texas at Austin. I had the opportunity to meet Byron and also listen to him at various ACCT-sponsored pre-conference symposiums. He focuses on areas of student success and trustee development. Fantastic information from him at every turn, so you can rest assured that there will be a lot to be gained by listening very intently to Byron. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Also, we have Dr. Patricia Keir. She is with ACCT. Patricia has a vast experience in community colleges, has worked with ACCT for quite some time. She is a recently retired Chancellor of the Eastern Iowa Community College District. And Patricia, we thank you for making yourself available to be with us here today. We're looking forward to everything that you have to say. Lastly, I would like to introduce Dr. Pete Mora, who is the president at Atlantic Cape Community College, and Pete is also the president or the chair, I should say, of the President's Council. Pete and I work very closely together on the executive committee at the council. And Pete, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, good morning. Welcome all here today. I'll be brief. I guess it's my job to share some momentum with you, with the group, mainly to our visitors, but also to the group here about where we are on this student success effort. First, I'd like to thank President Joanne Morales for hosting today's seminar. Thank you, Joanne. We appreciate it. Great facility as usual. With respect to momentum, this is important, I think, for all of us to acknowledge and for our speakers and invited guests. The State of New Jersey Council of County Colleges, trustees and college presidents, our council, we believe we really started some significant momentum. I shared this with Byron outside a little bit, especially over the past 3 years, toward this student success area. Tonight, in many ways, we're convening this capstone activity, which is our main trustee retreat and activity. 3 years ago, at an annual meeting of our trustees, we jointly agreed that student success will be the top campus and statewide priority for our colleges. So we've been at it before that, of course, but on a more formalized basis, 3 years and ticking. Fast forward, we have a big ideas project, which we completed. Those internally know what that is, For our visitors, these were a massive statewide, multi-institutional, every level in the college, what I would describe as structured brainstorming. We come up with a number, I think the number is 9, the number 9, big ideas, and began to form our work groups around that. And student success certainly was the key one there. Within the past 6 months, progress has been made, nothing short of remarkable. The Council's new Center for Student Success, which is a statewide resource that we operate from Larry's office, is now in place to help all 19 colleges. We'll talk about that later. In November, over 200 faculty convened to examine ways to strengthen our highest enrollment general education courses, the ones that most of our students take during that critical first year. Have some sector-wide discussions on that. The same faculty convened again in March and made additional progress. In November, we had 200 developmental faculty members meet, both math and English, convened to examine ways to strengthen our remediation programs, which is the heart of our student success. The same faculty convened again last Friday and made additional progress. 2 Fridays ago, English as a second language, which I know is a challenge for many states and community colleges, New Jersey is no exception, convened to examine ways to strengthen those important areas of our campuses. And just this morning, another statewide activity, over 100 of our student services staff, counselors and student development folks, deans of students, etc., convened to examine ways they can support faculty in our efforts to help more students succeed. Today, this afternoon, this capstone event is meant to be just that, an important way to engage in experts on the national level in student success. I welcome you as a part of the President's Council here today. Looking forward to a very, very successful event. We know the experience that these speakers bring, and they are truly at the national level, at the cutting edge. So I thank you for your patience on my comments. I'll be introducing now our Executive Director, Larry Nespoli.
Thanks, Peter, and I'd like to immediately ask President Joanna Pearl-Morales and Ashley, our student, to come up, and I'm going to get out of their way in less than 30 seconds. So we can hear from Pete. There's just a lot of good stuff going on. Exciting times, challenging times, of course, but it's all about student success. I think New Jersey had the larger part of wisdom in creating this state organization that combines presidents and trustees under the same umbrella. And we have a special thank you to trustees, busy lay people, to be here tonight to also engage in this important statewide student success conversation. You heard Pete say 3 years ago the trustees kicked it off at Hudson. We're here today going down this same path. So hopefully along the way tonight we'll have some fun too. We're going to hear from students throughout the night. We're going to invite trustees to take pieces of the placement test that our students take, so you can see firsthand what that means and what that feels like. And we're also, through the generosity, Dick Welbrock will say more about Dick, but Dick Wave, through the generosity of Dick and Ann Welbrock and Chairman Lee, you may have seen that we're offering some student success scholarships here tonight, and the staff is keeping tabs on the largest delegation from the colleges that will take home those student scholarships, so that's kind of a fun activity as well. And Joanne, thank you for hosting us this morning, and for now as well. Dr. Pearl-Morales does a great job here, of course, at Middlesex, but she's been one of our go-to people on these statewide student success efforts. She chaired the president's last year, handed off to Pete, and so off we go, continuing to move this student success agenda. Joanne.
Welcome, everyone. I'm not going to say anything else because I stand between the student speaker, and the students always speak much better than I can. So let me just introduce Ashley Castilla to you. She graduated from Middlesex County College in January 2012 with her associate degree in liberal arts general, and she is currently a student at Kane University majoring in English with a minor in history. And do we need English and history majors, critical thinkers? She expects to graduate in May of 2013, and I'm sure she will. So Ashley, please.
Thank you. I've had the privilege of meeting some of you already, but for those of you who I haven't met, welcome to Middlesex County College. I hope you guys enjoy your stay. one of the best pedagogical lessons I've learned is rooted in a conference I once had with one of my favorite professors in the education department at Kean University. Our assignment was a fairly simple one. Prepare a lesson plan for the grade and content of our choosing, and teach our education class as we would teach our own class. Well, this professor, known at Kean University as a fire-breathing dragon, spent most of her teaching experience working in Camden Public Schools as a secondary education English teacher, the same content and grade area which I chose. This made my assignment particularly difficult because of her expertise both in difficult classroom settings and, of course, the content. I was determined to impress not only my classmates, but this professor. Before we could present our material, however, we were obligated to conference with her one-on-one in order to best develop our lesson. I entered her office timidly, and we began to discuss our lesson plan, which I prepared for an honors high school level language arts class. On first looking into Chapman's Homer by John Keats. This is an Italian sonnet which describes the author's overwhelming experience reading George Chapman's translation of Homer's prolific writing. And he equates this reading to the discovery of the new planets or the Pacific Ocean when first viewed by Cortez. My professor listened to me, appreciated my choosing this poem, and of course, offered the great pedagogy. She said, "You must remember to give our students a fighting chance." At the time, her response to all my hard work and dedication, which I channeled into the interpretation of this poem, and which I was so proud, was puzzling. Our students, I thought. A fighting chance? What exactly are they fighting for? This is precisely what Middlesex County College offered me. A fighting chance. As I reflected on my professor's message, I realized it was three-dimensional. On one side, our students need fundamental skills in order to practically participate in the real world, as well as, but not equal to, the ability to practice in the decisions for the greater good of our communities. This includes, but is not limited to, study skills, analytical ability, and of course, communication skills. I can certainly attest to the development of my communication skills. While I attended Middlesex County College, I was privileged to work as an orientation leader, where my job description pushed me into this academic arena where I had to articulate myself efficiently so first-year students can understand my message. Ultimately, if our students learn these basic skills, they can use their abilities to choose to overcome their academic pasts, which may haunt them, various weaknesses, and any other crises which may chain them to their current circumstances. With this said, consider the students' circumstances who attend four-year universities in comparison to the students who attend community colleges. For example, in 2008, when I graduated high school, I was faced with my first real decision. I needed to make an independent and seemingly enduring financial decision. Where am I going to college? I had done what more students today are doing, applying to various schools and programs. When I did receive my acceptance and, yes, rejection letters, I had chosen my fate, a private four-year university, one I could not afford, one that did not offer the major at the time, which I wanted to pursue, and was way too far for the amount of gas money I was making as a weekend working barista in Barnes & Noble. When the day arrived to journey to this institution, take my college placement test, and register for my courses, I simply could not go. I was crippled under my own fears of academic and social failure, alongside the fear of failing my family's investments. Some of our students who attend college enter this academic world, which they may or may not have an immediate aptitude for, are identifying a risk. Their academic success, their financial investment, their family's livelihood, which they may depend on, and if, like myself, insecurities about it all. last semester after conferencing with who I later discovered to be one of the most challenging English professors for me at Kean University, he pointed out a flaw in my writing strategies. But having learned fundamental study strategies at Middlesex County College, I was given the key to success, that same fighting chance. The mission of Middlesex County College is to provide access to an affordable quality education for diverse students and to promote lifelong learning opportunities to strengthen the economic, social, and cultural life of the community. I had the ability to recognize my particular crisis, personalize my study strategy to my learning style, and resolve the issue. When I applied to Middlesex County College, I made the choice to take advantage of all that this community college had to offer. So on the very first day of this semester, my very first class, in fact, being my senior seminar English class, the course instructor had done an exercise with our class where we would determine that we knew more about literature than we thought. But my professor learned something more than my understanding of literature. I was collecting my things at the end of class, and it was that awkward moment where it's just you and that professor who determines whether or not you graduate, and you've never spoken before, but you know a conversation is coming. He asked suddenly, "You transferred in, didn't you?" "Beg pardon?" I replied. "Did you attend any other colleges other than Kean University?" "Yes," I said. "I graduated from Middlesex County College first, then transferred in." "I can tell," he said. "Community colleges always produce students who can master the fundamentals. You'll do well in this class. Good work today." In closing, Middlesex County College has at least one student today who recognized their choice and ability, like all community colleges, to help their students maximize this fighting. This will help our students eventually accept that key, which gives them the ability and the choice to succeed. I can only hope to one day have the opportunity to give back to our communities by continuing to teach from and share my personal story. As Alfred Lord Tennyson states in his In Memoriam, "I held it truth with him who sings, to one clear harp in diverse tones, that men may rise on the stepping stones of their dead selves to higher things." I'm very proud to be standing here today, upon the stepping stones of my dead and past self, liberated from the haunting of my academic past and that which chained and crippled me years ago. Rising to higher things, that is, graduating with my bachelor's degree in English with honors and attending graduate school this upcoming fall for English and Writing Studies at Kean University. Middlesex, thank you for giving me that fighting chance.
Thank you, by the way. That was the best way to start something like this off. My name is Dr. Pat Keir, as was mentioned, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the role and responsibilities of trustees in the student success effort. And I just want to say that Byron and I were able to be at the student success event this morning with your student service staff, counselors, deans, and we were just incredibly impressed by the commitment of all of the people in the room to student completion and student success. Just to start out, I wanted to tell you about a retreat that we were planning for the board that I reported to a couple of years ago for the Eastern Iowa Community College District. And we had a wonderful board, and we had a retreat such as you have for our board once a year. And they were, like you, very busy people, and so we were really eager to put into that retreat things that they really would care about and that they could put their teeth into and help us make the decisions that we needed to make. And so we had a big facilities bond referendum that we were about to launch, and so we brought in our people on that, and we were going to show them all the buildings that we hoped we'd be building and go into the detail. And I have to say, if there's one thing I noticed about trustees in my life, is they do really care about facilities and where the closet should go and what color paint the library should have. So I thought, okay, we'll probably only get to that, but we also had negotiations going on with our faculty, and of course that's always interesting. We were experiencing the budget cuts that we've all had. We just heard that we were going to take a 12% cut in our budget from the state of Iowa. We had some staff issues, and then we had student completion and student success. And so we got all organized for the retreat, and we started out with student completion and student success, and we hit the highlights and we showed them some numbers, and then we proceeded to move on. And the first hand went up and said, wait a minute, let's go back to that student success, student completion business. Now, what did that number mean there? How are our students doing compared to that college across the river, or all sorts of questions about it? And so we answered them, and then we moved on to negotiations, and we're trying to talk about, oh, wait a minute, you mentioned something about the role of our faculty. How well are they doing in helping our students succeed? And to be honest, we didn't get to any of the topics except student success and student completion. And the lesson that we all drew, all the college administrators who were there, was this really mattered to our board of trustees. This really mattered. The students and the fact that they could achieve what their goals were and succeed and complete. And they wanted our college and district to do as good a job as anyone else in the state or the world. And so we noticed that from then on, that became a very strong commitment to us in our trustee meetings, was to be sure to keep them involved and aware of the student completion agenda. So I'd like to, in a very short time, talk a little bit about the critical role of the boards in propelling the student completion and success agenda, and then show you a 6-minute video that comes from the GISS project, ACCT, that kind of describes what this is about. So the first, and I think most of you know this, so I will hit it very quickly, but first, why is it that student success and student completion has suddenly risen to the top of the community college to-do list? What's going on out there that causes a whole meeting like this to be devoted just to that one aspect of our college, student completion? First of all, as I'm sure you know, the American Graduation Initiative and the Obama administration have been very powerful in speaking to the need now for community colleges, in fact all of higher education, to move beyond access and to move beyond concern with our own inner workings, to start focusing on how good of a job are we actually doing for our students. How many of them are completing? Not just completing what it is that they want to do, but completing so that they walk out with the skills and education that they can make a contribution to our country. And all the quotes I have here are taken from the book that just come out by Noah Brown, and I'm sure most of you who've been to ACCT know Noah. He is the executive director and president of ACCT. And he said that the Obama administration identified community colleges as the primary sector of higher education most likely to affect degree completion because of their ubiquitous presence in every community in the country and the far-reaching impact of their mode of education. In other words, Barack Obama and the federal government, when looking at the wide range of higher education, has identified the community colleges as the linchpin to increasing completion in our nation. And that's kind of exciting, and it's kind of scary. I think for many years we've been used to being kind of the second-class citizens in the world of higher ed. People didn't pay much attention to us. We were mad about that, but on the other hand, it was kind of nice. Well, now suddenly we've risen to national prominence, and we are expected to make the most strong contribution to building the completion rates in our nation. And why now is student success so important? Why are we caring more now about student completion than we are about access, or having a lot of students able to come to us? I'm sure you've heard this many times. It's kind of depressing, and I actually could have found a lot more depressing data, but we're trying to have a positive experience here. The U.S. has ranked 16th in the world in the college completion degree among 25 to 34 year olds. Now remember that this country and our higher education system led the world only 30 or 40 years ago, and maybe even closer than that. We were tops in everything, and now we've sunk down to the 16th place, and I won't show you the list of all the countries that are doing better than us, but it's quite discouraging. Another point is that by 2018, nearly 2/3 of the jobs that we will have in the United States will require a post-secondary certificate or degree. Again, I know you know that a high school diploma doesn't cut it anymore. The nature of our jobs, even in manufacturing, which has become advanced manufacturing, are much more demanding, and they demand that students come out with at least an associate degree level of skill. Since 1980, we're underproducing graduates. Again, I think that one of the quotes or the pieces of data is that the top 1% of Chinese college graduates, their top 1% is about the same number as all our graduates. And so we are in a very competitive world, and we're going to have to start doing a much better job of graduating the students that we have. And an additional 15 to 20 million highly skilled workers will be needed for the workforce. You know, this was a very driving, the presidents in here probably remember how workforce development was our driving force for so long, and there was such concern that we wouldn't have trained workers for our local industries, and our chambers were bugging us, and everybody was saying, turn out those workers. And then the recession hit, and suddenly there weren't enough jobs to go around, and that kind of sank back into the past, and we didn't care about that so much. Well, guess what? It's coming back double now, because all of the people who hung in their jobs during the recession will start to retire, and we are in no way producing the students who have completed their voc tech degrees. State challenges, I'm not going to tell you what I'm sure you already know, which is, of course, the funding from the states is plummeting, and none of us expects when times get better that we will ever go back to our original share of state funding. It's almost like once it's taken away, we're not going to see it again. And also at the same time, we're getting less support financially. We're being held more accountable. At your colleges, the students who are coming in face far more barriers than the university students, but they're coming in with all sorts of issues and needs that they weren't coming to us with 10 or 15 years ago. So we've got all of this need for graduates and a very difficult situation. And as it says here, only 46% of our students who come into our colleges actually achieve the goal of completion. So less than half of our students complete. Thank you for being here as an N of 1, and I know there would have been an N of 2. The second point I want to make very quickly is a new focus on accountability. Again, Dr. Brown came up with what I thought was a very good definition of accountability, and trustees, who are elected officials in the main or appointed, are going to be held accountable for the performance of the colleges that they are governing. And what it means to be accountable is that accountability is a contract for assuring that when something is promised, something tangible is delivered. So start to think about what your community is looking to your college for, what your legislators are expecting from your college, what your Department of Education is expecting, what the federal people who are giving you a lot of financial aid are expecting. They are holding us all accountable now. No longer do people trust that we're just doing the best we can. They say, prove it. I have been trying to pass this off for decades, thinking it's going to go away, or it's a lot of language, but they don't really mean it. They mean it. And this goes across both parties. The Republicans have always been maybe stronger in this area. What are we getting for our tax? How efficient are you using it? But interestingly, when the Democratic administration came in, they were even harder on us in terms of being accountable. So this is not going to go away. Like all of higher education, demonstrating accountability constitutes an urgent rule of business for community colleges. This is taking primacy over many other issues currently faced by boards, while adding an extra layer of challenge for leaders. So as my board told me, Pat, we do care about these new buildings we're going to build, and actually we do care what color we put in the atrium, but we understand that more than all of that, it is the level to which we're graduating our students with quality education. Also, I think boards would be interested in the fact that our mission is to help our students. Our mission isn't just to pull in a lot of students and let them fade away or drop out. Our mission is to help them onto the road of opportunity. And the new completion agenda and the new report that just came out from AACC about reinventing the American dream is saying to trustees and presidents and staff and students, we have to rebuild that bridge to opportunity for everyone in the United States, and it is the community colleges who are going to do that. And so we need to commit to the success of our student. The American dream is at risk, they say. Community colleges can help reclaim it, but stepping up to the challenge will require dramatic redesign of these institutions, their missions, and most critically, their students' educational experiences. Why do you need to get involved in student success? I think I've made the case. And as the stewards of the college and those responsible to the communities and students you serve and representing the public interest and the interests of our country, it is really incumbent on you to become involved in this movement. Here's some of the roles that you might consider as you get involved. One of the things I suggest for trustees is to really learn about the challenges that your students are facing as they attempt to persist and they attempt to succeed in community college. Understand who your students are. Understand what they're bringing to the college, what kinds of insecurities, what kinds of educational preparation, what kinds of cultural, and most important, what kinds of dreams they're bringing. You need to understand who your students are. And then support your college's effort to implement new strategies and programs to help them move and complete. And by support, we're in hard times and we have to really look at our priorities when we haven't got enough money to really do what we need to do. And so look at placing a priority. Use learning and success of your students as your key touchstone for decision making. We've been hearing that for a long time. Let's really do it. And be a relentless advocate for the application of appropriate indicators of success for the community college. This is something our trustees can really help with. I know you've heard, if you've been to any of these meetings, that it doesn't seem that we're being held accountable, and the indicators that are being selected are those that match what we do. And trustees can really be helpful in helping legislators and others measure us by what we're trying to do, not measure us by a couple of goals that are more relevant to the four-year universities than they are for us. There's been a lot of movement in this, but we have to get people out to advocate for this. Make sure that you use valid and complete data and support a culture of evidence so you know how well your students are doing. I think your presidents now will provide you with that data a lot, but you want to know how well are we doing? And work collaboratively with your state and national board associations to propel the community college system to a critical role in solving the problems of our country through better educating our citizenry. Each of you as a trustee for your own college can make a difference, but all of you as a group of trustees for the state of New Jersey can make a better difference. And if you move forward and become then involved in the national movement of trustees to put a focus on student completion, to get fair indicators, and to seek the funding and the legislative support we need to achieve what we're trying to do, you can make a great deal of difference. As those of us that have gone to Washington to do a lot of lobbying realize, at least the presidents among us, A, they already know what we're going to say. B, they're tired of us coming with our hands out. And C, we weren't elected. Well, trustees are either elected or appointed. They're politically powerful people. And so when you go in with the help of your president and ask for the things that will help us help our students succeed, you can really make a difference. I am going to skip through some of this. Okay, ask the tough questions about progress on student success. That was what happened in that retreat. And we had a wonderful board. They just started asking really tough questions. Here was something we thought they weren't going to be that interested in, to be honest. And they knew exactly what they were talking about. They went right for the data and how are we doing related to this and how does this go? I think, again, because your presidents and colleges are on board with this, it's not that there's a resistance to providing these, but ask these kinds of questions. It shows that you care about student completion and success. And create the culture within which the CEO can engage in needed courageous conversation. There are groups in colleges, let's see, how do I put this? Sometimes people truly believe in the way we're doing things the way we're doing them now. For very good reasons, they're valid. But presidents, and I know in my experience, when you're trying to transform things and trying to change the experience of your students at your college, sometimes you have to take on some vested interests, particularly with faculty. Sometimes they see some of this as threatening to them or perhaps undermining their role or jeopardizing academic freedom. I see some chuckling going on. And from their point of view, that makes some sense. But you need to allow your president and others to step up and have these difficult conversations with his constituent who's actually thought this through and stand behind your president when and if some things go awry. Expect a relentless focus on the student success agenda. If you're not hearing about it, ask about it. And consider evidence-based changes in policy that affect student success. I put evidence-based because if there's data and solid information that show that some policies that you have at your institution are really serving as a barrier rather than a support for student success, you might consider some changes for your students. Just one example, this is a terrifying one for many people in this time where enrollment equals money. It was brought up this morning, was forbidding late registration. Should you have a policy that says if students aren't fully registered for their classes 2 weeks ahead of the start of the semester, that's it, right? They can't register, no late starts. That would be a policy that would be brought to the Board of Trustees to consider. And you'd want to really think about it and look at the pros and cons there and look at the evidence to see if that policy is likely to result in better completion and better success of your student. Even though you're sitting in a very risky situation where there's a trade-off, as there always is, you may see your enrollment plummet. And there's been a precedent, I'm going to not remember who he is, but it was in Inside Higher Ed where the enrollment of the college, the president took this courageous stand and he went in and said, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do these things. They have been shown by evidence and research that they will improve our student success. And the board stood behind him, and then the very next semester the enrollment went down 20%. All right, there's where the board and the president, you start talking about the level of support and how you can get behind this initiative. I'm not going to, again, go through all of these, but I think, again, your role is to approve the college's strategic plan as presented to you, generally after a very participative process. If you saw a plan that didn't have student success at the core, you might raise some concerns. You'd probably want to look for some goals that have to do with student success and completion. And a concomitant area there, of course, is success for whom. And when you look at the data and indicators at your college and you see achievement gaps, you see successful completion for some categories of students and not so good for others, that's another area of concern for the board. And then expect to receive some clear priorities to improve student success. I ripped through that so fast, and I really do apologize, but we've got limited time. So now I'm going to, if you have questions at the very end after Byron presents, then I would be delighted to go into more detail. Right now, I don't know if I'm going to right-click or put my finger on this, but I think we're going to see a video, and if we could get the lights.
These issues about promoting student success, they're really complex. On the other hand, the message is quite clear and elegant and simple. We, all of us, presidents, deans, faculty, staff, and yes, almost most importantly, trustees, need to focus more on student success. I'm thinking of a visual image that will bring this home, and Pat, you set this up for us so beautifully, and we'll now start to drill down a little bit more. But about 6 months ago, I was many of you were there, at a national community college gathering, maybe 1,000 presidents and trustees in the room. And somebody said, everybody who within the last 6 months, raise your hand if you've been at a trustee meeting, community college trustee meeting, where you've discussed enrollments. And of course, virtually every hand in this large convening went up. The speaker said, keep your hand up if in the last 6 months you've been at a trustee meeting, and I'm going to use Pat's language, where you've talked about creating a culture where you are supporting the president in engaging needed, courageous conversations about student success, or you've talked about allocating and targeting resources to support student success, or you've asked tough questions about student success. And while some hands stayed up, way too many went down. So you get the point. And there's just a shift occurring across the country where the, how many? 1,200 community colleges, 19 in New Jersey. The access agenda has been a wonderful success. And Vic, you've been the chair of the board at Union. You've seen that campus as one of our 19 grow and blossom. Boy, it's a feel-good story. But in this time of the year where we're going to commencements, it'd be a really greater story if more of those students get to that finish line, either with a certificate or degree. And so that's what we're talking about. So now, to help you see the challenges that our students face, and you know they come to us from many different backgrounds, many non-traditional backgrounds, all too often without support systems from their families. They come to Middlesex, and part of the deal is, trustees, you know this, we are open door by law. You graduate from a high school in New Jersey, or even if you don't graduate from a high school in New Jersey and you're 18 years of age, you are guaranteed admission here at Middlesex County College, or the others. But you are not guaranteed enrollment in the program of your choosing. You take a high stakes, we're going to hear that word, admissions, a placement test. And so we thought, what better way to have you see what our students experience than to take a few minutes, and we're going to do it now. And I'd like to introduce Rob Young-In, Director of Testing at Middlesex. He's got a couple of PowerPoints, but more importantly in your packet, you're going to see the algebra questions, the math questions. Now relax, we're not going to collect these and grade them, but we did want you to see. And by the way, all 19 of our colleges, to our president's credit and others, we use the same test. That's not true in other states. We use the same cut scores on math and English. So we have consistency across the state. And if you hit this cut score, sorry, I'm stealing your thunder here, Rob, but I'll get out of your way in a second. Into remediation you go, and you're going to hear more from Byron in a second, that the story is not a pretty one for students who get placed into remediation. So it is a high stakes test, and let's hear more about what that test looks like. Rob, take it away.
Hello everyone, my name is Rob Kim, and I'm the Director of Testing here at Middlesex County College, and I'm also one of the co-chairs for New Jersey TASIC, the New Jersey Test Administrators Special Interest Group, where 2-year and 4-year test administrators from across the state meet at least twice a year to discuss testing issues. When Dr. Nespoli called us and asked us if we could give some presentation at today's meeting, one of the first things that we discussed was the idea of high-stakes testing and placement testing. Before coming to Middlesex, I used to work at the Educational Testing Service, where I worked on college board programs like AccuPlacer, the test we use for placement here in New Jersey. And it's interesting, in testing circles, we would call AccuPlacer usually a low-stakes test. We consider high-stakes tests admissions tests. Can you get into this institution based on this test score and other factors? But as we know, now working in the community college sector, this is a high-stakes test. This determines where our students get to start here at Middlesex County College and all the 19 institutions. How long will it take them to reach their goal? Can they finish it in 2 years? Will it take 2.5, 3, 3.5? This test is what helps us determine, okay? All right, so again, what's the purpose of the placement test? Given to the students. And Accuplacer is also used by some of the four-year schools here in New Jersey as well, to find out what courses are most appropriate for them. Again, all 19 community colleges use Accuplacer in some format, and it helps. It's a suite of tests that quickly, accurately, and efficiently assess math, writing, and reading skills of our students. A little bit about Accuplacer and adaptive testing. Right? First of all, the multiple choice part of the test is adaptive, computer adaptive testing. What that means is the test will adapt itself to you. Most likely the first question you get in whatever topic it is, let's say reading comprehension or elementary algebra, will be somewhere in the middle difficulty-wise. You'll only see one question at a time. You'll read it, you'll answer it, you'll submit your answer to the computer. The computer will make sure you didn't hit submit by mistake, and then your answer is sent to the college board. It grades your question, determines whether it's right or wrong, and then sends you question number 2. Adaptive testing basically works this way. If you got the first question right, the second question you get will be a little bit harder. If you get the first question wrong, the next question you get will most likely be a little bit easier. Okay? So, scoring on a test is not so easy to say. I can't directly say you need exactly this many right to pass out of elementary algebra here in the state, because it's how many questions you get right, but also which questions you got right. Okay, what difficulty level were they at? Right? And individual score reports and placement results can be available to the student immediately. Schools do different policies on how they release the test scores, but they are available immediately. Okay? Now, let's start off with the elementary algebra test. It is a 12-question test. Like I said, because it's adaptive, it can be this short. Okay? Again, the advantage of adaptive testing is if you get getting the questions right, your questions will get harder. What the test does is skip the easy question, because most likely you would get those right anyway. Okay? And therefore, you're placed into a higher math class. Of course, the opposite's true. If you keep getting the answers wrong, the test will get easier. You'll skip the harder questions, because most likely you would get those wrong. And you're placed at a lower level. All right? So it is multiple choice. It's a computer adaptive. One advantage is that it's unlimited time. On the multiple choice test, we give our students all the time they need. Here at Middlesex, I think the shortest I've seen somebody go through our placement test that normally takes the students 2 to 3 hours to complete is 20 minutes. I've seen one student set the record in the last 6 months, took 8.5 hours to finish the placement test. God bless him, we gave him all the time he wanted. But he took that much time. Now, and the Accuplacer calculator is available for some items. Now that I don't have a picture of for you in your packets, but basically the Accuplacer calculator is just this. It is a basic calculator. All it does is add, subtract, multiply, and divide. It's not a graphic calculator. It won't even give you the square or the square root of a number. Okay? And it is only available in certain questions. So for instance, if the question is very simple, what's an addition problem, what's 5 plus 5, you're not going to get offered a calculator by the College Board. They want to know if you understand addition, not whether you know how to punch that into a calculator. But let's say if the question was a little more complicated, what is the area of a square where one side is 5? Now, if you don't remember the formula for the area of a square, the calculator wouldn't help you anyway. The calculator might help you get the answer a little quicker, then there they might offer you a calculator. Okay? So, now, on the test, there are 3 types of tests, 3 areas that they're testing on the elementary algebra test. And the first one is operations with integers and rational numbers, which includes these following topics. Also, operations with algebraic expressions, and translating written phrases into algebraic expressions. and solving equations. All right? Now, I usually tell students when they look this over, if these terms are familiar to them and they can think of an example of each one, they're in pretty good shape. If they look at that list, they say, I think I've heard of those words, but I can't think of an example for the life of me. Well, you might know it. You've heard of the terminology, you've heard it in your class from your teachers. Go back and study and review, okay? Because nobody wants you placed in a class that you don't need to take, right? And if you completely have never heard of these terms before, maybe your teacher used a different word for it. Try, take a look at it. If not, you'll learn it with us. I mean, that's our purpose. All right? Now, what I did for you, everyone, in the packet, and you'll see something like this. Of the public items that the College Board gives to students to review, I've picked 12 of them, the harder ones, granted, because I can't really give you, of course, an adaptive test in a paper and pencil format. I do give you the answers, and no, Larry and I joked about this, that we would collect the items and score it and give it to you later. I gave all the answers and explanations attached. But I would like you to try doing these items and seeing if you get them right. I would say roughly if you get 8 or 9 of these questions right out of 12, you should probably get out of elementary algebra. All right? This is what we're asking our students to do. Right? They need a 76 out of a test that scores from 20 to 120 on this test to place out of elementary algebra. Right?
All I can tell you is I graduated with an undergraduate degree in mathematics in 1974, and I don't remember any of the stuff.
How long ago was the AccuPlacer, the math part of it, developed for what it's trying to accomplish here in New Jersey?
AccuPlacer was originally developed with the College Board and the Educational Testing Service. Right now it's with Pearson and the College Board. But the basic design was set up more than 10 years ago. The cut scores by the community colleges were set up about 5 years ago. Agreed by the math faculty meeting and agreeing on a common set of skills needed to be needing remediation or ready for college level work. The test is constantly being tweaked though and checked by the College Board. I don't know how often they do refresh the items though.
Okay, so it reminded me, I don't like math.
Exactly.
I mean, I think that one of the initial students in the Rowan cohort did a study on the math test and built in a refresher course and was able to show dramatic improvements on the part of students. So I think we have all the evidence we need about that. If we look at Jennifer's work as part of her dissertation, and I think this might be a good reminder of why that would be a good thing to do.
Jim, it doesn't matter when that was developed, because those are dealing with internal verities. From all times. From the ancient Greeks, that never changes.
We did do a boot camp with the Pearson materials, and we just found a dramatic change. I've forgotten the exact percentage, but something like 90% of the students were able to move directly into college level math. The other point I would make, licensing exams are built on the workforce. Those questions are developed around a workforce analysis, not on what academics think the students need to know.
Well, I'm a nursing student, so we actually do not do like algebra and all those stuff. But I took up to Calc 2 several years ago. And I miss doing this stuff.
I think the most important thing for our students is that before they get to us, this is where the work we need to do with the high schools become very, very important. Because if the students take Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 in high school, chances are they'll do well on the test. But if they don't take those two courses in high school, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to succeed. So I think this is the work we do with high schools coming to play in getting the mindset and getting the students ready. I think Dr. Nespoly said it. Yes, we are an open access institution, but once you come in, you got to take some tests in order for us to get ready.
And Dr. Sekinibi Thomas, you've been working with our academic officers, and Byron may comment on this later. I think we've all realized that one cut score on one test, not so good of an approach. A better approach, a richer approach is multiple measures. And again, through your coaching, our colleges now have a cut score, but then a zone, a decision zone around the cut score. So if a student gets close to, but not at the cut score, we look at some other things. What was their high school GPA? And we'll allow them to opt up into the college course. So I think we're getting more knowledgeable about all of this, and I'm sure Byron will comment about that from his experiences in other states. Rob, do you want to take a quick peek at the English side?
Sure. My partner was supposed to present this part, so I'm going to have to wing it for her. I'm sorry she had a family emergency. Now, most of us use the AccuPlacer, RightPlacer essay system to measure English writing skills, okay? It's a computer-based writing assessment. Again, they write online, and it can be immediately scored by the computer. All right? Now, it is scored on a 1 to 8 point essay scale, and roughly, if you score 6 or above, you're college ready. If you score from 0 to 5, you need some type of remediation. And it's scored on 6 dimensions: purpose and focus, organization and structure, development and support, sentence variety and style, some mechanical conventions, and critical thinking. All right? Now, please remember, computerized scoring of essays is not artificial intelligence. It is mimicking, it is a computer trained to read and score an essay based on human scores of at least 500 essays of different ranks. It analyzes and sees patterns and what essays the professor scored high, medium, and low, and the computer mimics that, okay? So it's not really the computer thinking itself. A computer can't read an essay, all right? And here's a sample doc. Oh, also in your packet, we give you a little more technical information about how the computer is scoring the essay. But sample I can give is, the students are asked to read a short passage, and given the citation, and then asked to answer a question. It is nothing the students could really study for. It's not like they have to remember a whole bunch of quotes from Shakespeare or from Hemingway, but it's asking them for their opinion. So an actor, when his cue came, was unable to move onto the stage. He said, "I can't get in, the chair is in the way." And the producer said, "Use the difficulty. If it's a drama, pick the chair up and smash it. If it's a comedy, fall over it." From this experience, the actor concluded that in any situation in life that is negative, there is something positive that you can do with it. The citation there is given, right here, and the assignment. Can any obstacle or disadvantage be turned into something good? Okay? So, all right. The instructions for the RightPlacer ask the students to write from 300 to 600 words on a topic. Basically, typing your essay into the computer is like using WordPad. It's not like Microsoft Word. It doesn't give you the little red squiggly line every time you misspell a word, or the blue or green one when you have a grammatical mistake. I mean, that's part of the test, right? So they type the answer in, and then they submit it. They have up to 60 minutes. This was the agreement between all 19 community colleges, to give them up to 60 minutes to write an essay. All right? Now, I believe it's here. And again, generally a 6 means you're ready for college level work, English. 5, some remediation is required. Now, again, after the math test and the answers, what we've given you from what the College Board has also provided from the students is an example of an essay written by an actual student and scored at the level 5, which means they need some remediation. And an essay, written by a student and given a score of 6, which means they're ready for college level work. Okay? If you want, you can take a quick look at that. Again, as you can see from the essays, they don't have to be perfect. We realize that this is a first draft, and no, they're not using a word processing program. They just have to be basically writing at the 12th grade level. Anything else, of course, they're coming to us to learn.
Kim, maybe you could, Rob, maybe you can make sense of a quick observation at our table. We didn't think the essay scored 5 was that bad. So, did you highlight something in there that says that student needs remediation? I'm putting you on the spot, I know. But,
Lori was a little better prepared for this than I was on the essays. Again, it shows that using the College Board rubrics, it's not a bad essay. And, you know, given maybe that the person had a chance to rewrite it, could do better. But most essay tests, even just like the SAT, it's, here's your topic, you know, you got to produce, all right? In industry, we all know, you got to write that memo, you got to write a quick executive summary, you got to write that email, you know, is it good enough? You can see from the scoring here that the College Board felt that this is the reason why it was appropriate to score at a level 5, and the annotations are specific to that essay. Now, on the College Board website, you can download this document as well. What it will do is, using that sample question that we gave, it will actually give 2 samples of essays from scores 1 through 8, and why those scores were given that way. This is a useful document. If you read it from beginning to end, you can see the differences slowly get better. Now again, I'm not an English teacher, so I couldn't pinpoint the exact number of grammatical mistakes or spelling. I apologize for that. But personally, you know, I thought spell check was the greatest invention since sliced bread for myself. But, you know, we want people writing at the 12th grade level. You know, again, we'll teach them advanced writing, report writing, or anything like that. That's what the college is for. But we need to know that they have the basic skills to have it. 6 was considered by the English faculty and by the vice presidents of academic affairs at the colleges to be the level I think by the College Board to be at the good enough to start it at freshman English at all of our colleges. All right.
Casey, forgive me, we only got our money's worth out of you because some of you may have not heard the sad news that Casey's leaving us to go to SUNY, but not too many years ago, you were teaching English at community colleges. What do you make of this English side?
The writer's close, but the writer jumps around and doesn't do the really important job of building transitions from one idea to another. And I think if you were sitting in on an upper level developmental English class, that's what you'd hear about. You'd hear about paragraph development, you'd hear about transitions, you'd hear about leading the writer in a purposeful way from one idea to another. And so this one falls a little bit short. In an hour, it falls a little bit short. You know, students may actually, and what the student would likely experience on our campus would be the accelerated English programs called English 1 with workshops. The student would probably, with a 5, be placed into our first level of college English with a supportive workshop and additional 1 credit course that accompanies that would help the student deal with the language issues.
As all of you know, we've been working on these big ideas for about 3 years with your leadership as trustees. And in the last 2 weeks, I've had the pleasure both with our academic affairs officers and then more broadly with our English as a second language student faculty members, really helping to lead what's going on in New Jersey under your guidance. We still haven't taken time to come up with a better name than the big ideas, but we have been very engaged in doing the work that we set before ourselves about how do we promote student success. Not just say we're about students, but really find ways to remove the barriers and facilitate their learning so they'll be more successful learners. It has been my pleasure over, I don't remember how many years, to know Dr. Byron McClenny and Dr. Patricia Keir. It's Byron's turn now. Byron has had leadership at many colleges, most recently at Denver Community College and at Kingsborough Community College in New York, so familiar with our neck of the woods. Byron has long been a leader and always stood for how do we have access and affordability for students and still be able to show that we did what we're about, that we created dreams, that we helped people reach their goals to open futures they didn't know about. And Byron has been leading that charge since before we knew about achieving the dream, almost before UT Austin was graduating our leaders, and now we're working with Rowan University in a community college leadership program. So in that respect, you're a little bit out of your territory, but we're glad to welcome you here anyway. It's my honor to welcome Byron McClenny.
Well, good afternoon. As she said, it still is, and we're delighted that you're here and that we'll continue this conversation about student success. I want to go back and pick up on something that Pat touched on lightly in her presentation, but I want to tell you about how this list came to be. This is a look at what I would call an effective board focused on the student success agenda. And I want to talk a little bit about the background that led to the creation of this list. I've had the real privilege over the last almost decade now working on a number of student success initiatives, and as a result of that have been taking good notes for a long time. All the coaches, leadership coaches who work in Achieving the Dream work for me at UT. There are about 42 of them now, and they've now written over 1,600 coaching reports about multi-day visits to colleges that are trying to transform the way they do their work. And from those coaching reports about how things are going in the life of a college, we have been able to pull a lot of information about where are things working and where are we struggling. And so that's a major source of this list that I want to just kind of go back over and expand on just a bit. Number two, in Texas with two foundations, we were asked back in 2007 to start some trustee institutes that they always require us to take to Santa Fe. So we take Texans to Santa Fe for 2.5 days, and we have boards there now that have done that for 7 straight years. And many boards that have been doing that have had all members of their board involved in multiple trustee institutes over time, and we're able to follow their progress as they work on a student success agenda and work on student issues that lead to the kind of transformed college that we're after as we think about the needs across the country. Then I've now been a party to 22 trustee institutes in a number of states around the country. In fact, I came here from one that we did in California for 12 community college districts in California. And at every one of those events, we listen to trustees and we look at data and talk about how they're doing on the student success agenda, drawing from that as well. And then as we think about trustees and their role, we've also done a lot of questioning in case studies. And in fact, the little book you have from ACCT has a couple of case studies in it that might be of some interest to you when you have time for a little leisurely reading. They're easy reads, but they kind of recap a college and its transition from where it was to where they're now focused on student success in a way that they had not been before. This whole student success movement has really gotten great momentum only since 2004. If you go back and look at agendas of trustee meetings, agendas of AACC, agendas of professional associations, you won't find a lot about student success prior to 2004. And since that time, it's just soaring. And you are one of those states that is on the case, and it's really nice to come and see all the things you have going here in your state with trustees and CEOs and others like your student services people who were with us this morning. But here are some things that I hope you'll take seriously as we talk about what does it take from the board to help an institution transform itself. And we're drawing from hundreds of colleges, literally all over the country, and sharing this list with you. So I just want to expand a bit on what's been shared there. This notion of a culture of inquiry and evidence. It really is important for me to emphasize for trustees the importance of what we call cohort or longitudinal tracking of student progression through your colleges. Now, that's not a term that you would have used a lot, I don't imagine. You've had some presentations, I think, in the last year or two where that notion has been broached, I'm sure. But what I want to suggest to you is that you really can't have a deep, robust conversation, an intelligent conversation about student success absent cohort data. What happens to students over time? And it really takes 5 or 6 years following a cohort of students before you really know what's happened to them, particularly when you're including part-time students along with full-time students. So just think about the year 2012, 2013, and think about going back 6 years and picking up on all those student records that you had 6 years ago and follow them for 6 years moving to this year and find out what happened to them. How many of them had completions, certificates or degrees? How many of them successfully transferred? How many of them successfully got through developmental ed? We'll talk about more of that, and you'll see some New Jersey data here before we're through in a little while. But trustees asking questions it will be an important point, and Pat has already made that point. A culture of inquiry and evidence, though, culture is the key word here. The board creates a culture, and we'll talk about that interface with the CEO's role in just a moment. But think about yourselves as creating the culture within which this work has to take place, collectively, where you decide and broadcast to the world you're going to be serious about student success. And in doing that, you're going to be serious about looking at data. How many of you would say right now that you have a strategic plan in place where student success is at the very core of that strategic plan? Anybody want to say that? At least half? Close, over half. Terrific. That's terrific. An important step to take if you really are going to get serious about student success and completion. How about this next one? The notion of goals for student success and equity. As we look at data at community colleges across the country, we clearly see that we are lagging on completion. And as we look with disaggregated data, we can see all sorts of gaps that exist that we need to talk about. And so I'm wondering if any of you have gone so far as to actually set a target for improving overall success or closing gaps between groups of people on the basis of something. Race, ethnicity, gender, age, part-time status, full-time status. If you've done that, could I see your hand? Okay, close to half in the room. Terrific, terrific. The next idea is an important idea for trustees to think about, because really prior to that 2003-2004 time period, very few boards across the country were spending much of their time looking at student success data. Buildings, budgets, bonds, union contracts, personnel issues, you bet. But student success prior to this last decade was just not there very often. And the notion of boards monitoring indicators, key performance indicators, anybody use that terminology, key performance indicators? Okay, one college. Dashboards, anybody using dashboards? Okay, 2 or 3 others joining. Scorecards, anybody using a scorecard? Another term that many boards are beginning to use to think about how to monitor over time progression of students through a college. One of our colleges early on in the Achieving the Dream work actually got the board at every meeting to take a look at how a cohort was doing. And so every time a board would come together for a regular meeting, they'd have an item on the agenda, and they'd pull up on their screens the latest report on how the cohort they were tracking was then doing. How many of them had dropped out? How many of them had persisted from one term to the next? And so beginning to do that kind of activity in a monitoring kind of way is an important way to set the culture, to help people see that you're serious about doing that work. As you think about the future, as you think about a student success agenda, we found across the land that the colleges that get clear about what's most important are the ones that really get the attention of everybody in the college, where they know that there are some priorities that are going to be pursued. Here I used the number 3 to 5 clear priorities to improve student success in each annual cycle of activity. I once went to a very prominent community college system in America where they said, coming in, you don't need to worry about priorities. We're clear about our priorities. And I said, well, would you send me a copy so at least I can be aware of what you're saying? They had 39 priorities. Well, folks, you can't have 39 priorities. You have none if you have 39. So that the conversation really has to be about what is most important at this particular stage in our development. We're on a pathway, and as you begin to develop a culture of inquiry into evidence, you begin to have a baseline against which to make comparisons. And as you do that, and as you look at the interventions that you try, and as you evaluate those interventions, you get a sense of how you're doing, and where you identify problems that need to be solved, where you do new research in your community or your service area, and you add priorities there. The conversation about what's most important is what I'm talking about here when I refer to priorities. Now, Pat made a reference to the tough questions. In a recent Trustee Institute, we had a couple of board members say, well, why don't you just create a few 3x5 cards with key questions that we'd have behind our nameplate on the board table. And when somebody's making a presentation, it would help cue the kind of questions we ought to ask. But just think about the number of times you've heard a presentation from a student group or from a faculty member or a department head or a dean, and they're all excited about the progress that they think they're making, and they assert that this is a really good effort that they're undertaking. And it might just be simply a question of, how do you know? How do you know that it's a good project or a good intervention? Show me the data. What data do we have to indicate that it's making a difference in the lives of the students who are being involved in that effort? Trustees should be asking those kinds of questions. How do you know? This next point, I want to add just a bit to what Pat had to say about the culture within which a CEO does his or her work. The way I like to talk about that is to say that a board has to have the back of the president to do really, really tough work. The truth is that whatever your data are, you're perfectly designed today to produce those data. Perfectly designed. So if you want better outcomes, you've got to change the way you do your work. You've got to do things differently. And when CEOs start trying to do things differently, there are people who push back. Inevitably, there are people who are going to push back. And so the notion of board members as a unit, creating a culture within which a CEO can do courageous work, do tough work, is an awfully important idea for trustees to take home and talk about. And that doesn't mean you don't ask tough questions, but when push comes to shove, you need to have the back of your CEO so that he or she knows that the tough work can be done, that he or she can do courageous work with the people of the college. This next idea about allocation and reallocation, it's clear today that you are going to be asked to serve more diverse students, take them to higher levels of attainment, and to do that with less money. That's the future of community colleges in America. Whether we like it or not, that's our future. And so this issue around reallocation is a really important point to dramatize. We have one college that I've worked with since 2004 that in its first 3 or 4 years of working on the kind of agenda we're here to talk about, reallocated $10 million of existing resources to do new things. Now, it's a large college, 30,000 plus students in any given term on a multi-campus operation, but a $10 million reallocation of resources over a 4 or 5 year period to do new things, with no new money coming from its state, allowed that college to really revitalize the way they were working on student success. So think about all the resources you have and think about reallocation as an important ingredient in your future. And think about resources beyond just thinking about money. Think about resources in terms of people, space, and time. All of those are resources that can be reallocated and make a difference then in deciding to take on some new things that you believe will move the agenda on student success. The next reference to a relentless focus. A CEO cannot have a relentless focus on student success unless he or she knows that the board is there with the CEO. There are too many things that happen every day in the life of a president or a chancellor in America's community and technical colleges that tend to take us away from the central mission of helping more students attain at higher levels. And so if the board sees the importance of that and enables the president to have a relentless focus on this agenda, then you've got a chance to do things differently. And finally, evidence-based changes leading to policies that focus on student success. We'll talk about some of those policies before we're through, but I just wanted you to be aware that this list is not just dreamed up by somebody sitting at a desk. It comes out of hundreds of reports about what's going on in colleges that really are beginning to move the needle on student success. It comes out of work of board members just like you talking about what makes a difference when you really change the culture in the life of the organization. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of additional taste of what I think goes into that mix. Let me stop at that and see if anybody has a reaction, a question, wants to push back on any aspect of what these two slides share with you. Yes, sir.
Byron, in the 6 or 7 states that you've gone through the Institute thus far, in the overall program, is there an aha moment when the light seems to go on with the trustees? And if there is, can you share it with us?
We're going to hope that that light goes on in that last conversation we're going to have before you leave here this evening. We'll hope that that's what occurs. It typically happens in these events. They typically are a day and a half at least in length, so we're compressing a lot here in this event. But what typically happens is by the time we get to a final conversation, where trustees are sitting with other trustees and talking about what we've been talking about in an institute like this, they begin to have the light bulb turn on. In 2 states, we've gone back a year later and done a second institute. So we had a chance to watch all trustees in Washington and all trustees in Ohio from 1 year to the next to see what happened. From one report out at the end of a trustee institute until a year later when they came back and said, here's what we did in the intervening year. And inevitably, they talk about that light bulb turning on, and many of them use that image. And when they did a report at it at the end of the event, they said, we're going to go home and try to do this. A year later, they came back and reported how they had done it. And that was really gratifying to see that happen in so many places. In Ohio, we had 22 colleges involved. In Washington, over 30 colleges involved. And many of those had their entire board present in an event like the one we're doing here. Other reactions, comment, question, reaction that would be important to you to touch on here? Okay, well, let's take a next step then in talking about student success and what might be worth monitoring. Many colleges miss this first one, and it's probably the easiest one to pull up. Because you register students and you give grades, you've got the ability to look at semester course completion. And in every case, when I begin to talk about a measure of student success, you'll note the footnote at the bottom. We always encourage colleges to be thinking about disaggregating those data on the basis of race and ethnicity and age and gender, and you can think of others, Pell status or not, full-time or part-time status. There are many ways to disaggregate. But to think about semester course completion, C or better. The first event that we did in Ohio, we discovered in preparing for the meeting that in Ohio they used a D as a measure of success. And we literally embarrassed them over that. I don't think there are many people who would defend a D as a measure of success. There are some research studies that follow up on students who make C's to see how they perform in subsequent courses. And there are some struggles there sometimes for students who make C's, but certainly D's are not the measure of success that we're after. So we ask the threshold be set at C or better. And you can do that by discipline. You can do that by career programs and liberal arts programs. You can do that by departments or by divisions. Think of all the ways that you might look at semester course completion as a measure of how students are doing. We often have people push back as we're talking about student success and say things like, not all of our students come to get degrees. And I bet there's somebody in here who, if given the chance, would say that. And the answer is always, you're right. But I think it is fair to say that all students, after they go through what we put them through to get them registered, they at least plan to finish what they start that term. Not many students come to our colleges thinking, well, I'll go for a third of the term and then go do something else. They come to finish that term at the very least. And if they finish that first term successfully, they then have a foundation for much more success to come. So thinking about semester course completion as a way to begin to talk about student success is something that I suggest to you is worth pursuing vigorously as you think about monitoring student movement through your college. The second one, I would refer to a question I posed this morning to your student services personnel, and they were a great group this morning. I asked the question, is there anyone in the room who would say that your college, looking at first-time enrolled students in any fall term, have less than half of your students, who are college ready? And everybody was there. In other words, more than half of all students need remediation was the answer that we were getting. So how students progress through developmental, however we describe it, some people use different terms. I was just in California where they talk about basic skills, and somewhere else they'll talk about preparatory studies or transitional studies. Lots of different names, but whatever we do to help students who are not college ready get college ready, how they progress through that sequence is what we think is so important to track. If a majority of all your first-time students need remediation, and that appears to be the case in your state. We did a study in Texas for all the Texas colleges participating in our Trustee Institute there, and we followed every student in those colleges who started in developmental mathematics. And we followed them for 2 years to see if after 2 years they had completed developmental math and passed a college math course. You with me? So a 2-year time period, starting in developmental math, did I pass my college math requirement? In Texas, at least, many colleges had a single-digit percentage of all those who started in developmental mathematics. When trustees first saw those data, they were kind of blown away by that. But it got their attention, and it changed the conversation in those colleges as they began to look at the lack of student success in developmental mathematics. There is no bigger problem in America today than that on our community and technical college campuses. Look at this next one. Successful completion of gateway courses. As we started Achieving the Dream, unfortunately we used the term gatekeeper courses, and I'm sorry we did. They serve as gatekeepers in too many colleges, but we want those courses to become gateway courses. High enrollment, high failure rate courses. English composition would be one of them. College algebra would be one of them. Anatomy and physiology would be one of them for students interested in a health career. An intensive reading course like Introduction to History would be an example. A tough science course that's a freshman level course would be an example. So where are the high enrollment, high failure rate courses, and how do we prepare people for success in those gateway courses? Now, before I take a next step, anybody want to react to what you see there? Raise a question about that, make a statement about any of those as worthy of monitoring as you think about progression of students through your college. Back here, Peter.
Could you just comment on those gateway courses as they may represent most of the kinds of courses first-year students would take that are not developmental, true college-level first year? Those gateway courses. I know you mentioned some of them. Could you comment a little bit further on that?
Well, many colleges that began to do this work systematically would start with something like, let's look at the 10 highest enrollment, highest failure rate courses we have. I've seen a number of colleges that did that, and interestingly enough, in almost every case, 7 out of 10 will have a math base. It'll either be developmental math or college math, or they will be a course like economics, for example, that have the need for the ability to do mathematics well. But what are those high enrollment, high failure rate courses? And you can know that by just looking at your own data. And that's a great way to start the conversation.
And I'd just like to mention that if you run that data and then you let the faculty sit down and take a look at it and talk about the skills that students need to be prepared for that course, we found at my previous institution that history, which was a required course, was one that was a high reading course, but they also chose biology to watch because of so much vocabulary in the entry-level science course.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Byron. It was mentioned earlier about the notion of boot camps in advance of some of these placement tests. And I've heard that before, and it seems to be a very highly effective tool. What's your reaction to that generally, and how do you think that would impact upon some of the figures that you stated and some of the difficulties that have been talked about?
A refresher before assessment is one of the most promising steps I see being taken across the country. In many colleges, doing summer bridges or boot camps, as some are calling them, it allows students who go through that experience to avoid developmental courses altogether, or it helps them place at a much higher level so that they're not trapped in a multi-semester pilgrimage toward a college credit course. So it's one of the more promising interventions that I see taking place across the country.
Just as a follow-up, are you aware of schools in particular who have used them, or in other words, I'm looking for a sort of toolkit or a blueprint or something that can be brought back to a particular school in order to, for us to consider it for that purpose?
A great source of that would be Achieving the Dream. So just simply doing a Google search on achievingthedream.org, Achieving the Dream, all one word, .org, and you will find all sorts of examples at that website. Yes, sir.
Also, at our NLS, I met a gentleman from Houston, Texas, who's part of the campus group, the sorority, and they had a boot camp, a math boot camp, as a way of work with African American males. And I thought that was exciting and something that I'm going to try and have him speak when we go to Seattle. But those are the kinds of practices that I think we need to pull to the forefront that are helping. And he was very successful, he said, and he's moving on to the community college campus this year.
Yep. The encouragement that I want to give is to let your data take you where you need to go. It's always tempting to hear a presentation about a particular intervention and to think, well, I want one of those, whatever it might be. And it's almost never the right answer, even though it might be exciting to think about. And as I'm thinking these thoughts, let me just tell you a quick story about Valencia College in Orlando, Florida, which is a college that I know really well. Valencia was the winner of the Aspen Prize a year ago. They were involved in Achieving the Dream from the very beginning, and I happened to be their coach back in 2004, and I'm still their coach. So I know them as well as they know themselves. And they were a college that had everything that anybody had that could be described as innovative. They literally had one of everything. And one of the things that was most fun about watching them work is the process through which they went to decide on what their priorities were going to be. To say out of all those things, and the way we talked about it was 1,000 flowers blooming. Anybody involved in any one of those 1,000 innovations felt good about what he or she was doing. But the question was, how do we help more students succeed? And Sandy Shugart, who is a good friend and longtime president there, came up with the notion one day while we were having lunch, and literally it's the story of, on a napkin at the table, drew a funnel. So think about a funnel with the big end and the narrow end, and the 1,000 flowers at the top of the huge end of the funnel, and then 2 or 3 priorities coming out of the narrow exit at the bottom of the funnel. And I watched that college go through that process, and they heard me talk about focus more than anybody ever wanted to hear a talk about focus. But they literally did decide on 3 priorities that would be college-wide efforts to change what was happening to students in the life of their college. And they decided that they would take their first look at what we're calling gateway courses to see if they were beginning to move the needle. The first look they took, just to give you a quick illustration, African American students were 16% below white students in that college on successful completion. After 3 years of the 3 priorities being implemented across their college, that gap had been narrowed from 16% to 3.2%. Now think about that. That is huge movement in a large college. Hispanics, during that same period of time, went from about 6% below to 3.2% above whites during that same period of time on success in gateway courses. So focused on the interventions that were right for them. Now, I would never suggest that you look at what those 3 were and just plunk them into your colleges. That is not my message. Let the data take you where you need to go as you think about the needs of your particular institution. And many of you are on that pathway, and I know that. But it's tempting, and it's tempting for trustees sometimes to hear a presentation about a particular intervention and go home and say, I'd really like for us to have one of those. And so my encouragement to you is, please don't do that, but rather create the culture within which your CEO and all the folks who work in your college can go through the process of examining your data and think about what the interventions need to be for your students once you understand them fully and realize where the gaps are that need to be addressed. Okay, anything else before I move ahead? Okay, let's take a next look. Again, now thinking about movement over time. Remember, I've said now that we need to be thinking about following students over a 5 or 6 year period to find out what happens to them. One of those looks that we need to take is term to term and year to year. So if you're looking back, let's look back to the fall of 2011 in your colleges. And if you could follow every student who entered your college as a first-time student in the fall of 2011, what percent of them were back in the spring of 2012? And then what percent of them were back in the fall of 2012? Persistence, retention. And then along the way, do they earn certificates? Do they complete degrees? And do they successfully transfer? Again, thinking about progression through your college. This is a way to have a conversation about student success as they move through your institutions. And what's emerging across the land these days is the notion of colleges being funded now on the basis of these outcomes as opposed to being funded on the basis of enrollment. So be ready for that. If it hasn't already hit you in New Jersey, it's coming. Legislators talk to each other across state lines. Governors talk to each other across state lines. I was in Ohio 2 weeks ago, and in Ohio this next fiscal year, 50% of the community and technical college funding is going to be based on outcomes like I've just described to you. In Texas, the legislature is about to adopt a stance that will say 10% of Texas community college funding in the fall of 2013 will be based on what they're calling success points. So students achieving each of these points along the progression will earn a point for funding in the college in that scheme of funding. Tennessee's been working on it for years. The state of Washington put into place a system very much like this. So think about these as points along a continuum as students progress through your college, and think about these as ways to talk about student success. Now, before I take a next step, let me pause again and see if there's a reaction, question, statement that somebody would like to toss in here for us to think about. Is this resonating with you? Okay. Yes, right here.
What about a student that takes 4 years to earn a 2-year degree? That wouldn't fit in persistence term to term, year to year, would it?
It would fit when you start looking at the completion of certificates and degrees. And where you see the reference here to 15 and 30 credit hours, you begin to pick up on progression there. The Texas scheme that I just mentioned, where they're using success points as the idea. If a student goes to a community college and completes 15 credit hours and then transfers, that student will earn 1 point for his or her community college. If a student stays and completes 30 credit hours, they'll earn a 2nd point for their college. And if they complete an associate degree and transfer, they'll earn another point. So you begin to see the incentive for causing students to stay with you until they complete 15, 30, and completion of an associate degree. So progression is what we're looking at here.
So these are all different definitions of student success, none of which are mutually exclusive to the other.
Yeah.
Is that?
This emerged out of the reaction across the land when legislators started talking about graduation rates. And people started saying, wait a minute, graduation rates by themselves are not sufficient. We do so much more. If a majority of our students come in needing remediation, just completing remediation is success. Getting enough credits, 15 or 30, to successfully transfer measures success. Completing a certificate is a point of success, and so on. Larry.
Just a quick legislative update from New Jersey. Legislators talk to one another. And Assemblywoman Celeste Riley, Salem and Cumberland counties, has introduced a performance funding bill. She chairs the Higher Education Committee that would tie state aid to certain performance metrics for community colleges, state colleges, even private colleges. Senator Cunningham, Hudson County, chairs the Senate Higher Education Committee. She has a like bill in that would require the reporting of performance standards for all students who receive state student financial aid. So they do talk to one another, and I don't expect either of these bills to move rapidly in our state, but there is growing legislative momentum throughout the country and here too.
When legislators go to the National Council of State Legislatures, and when governors go to the National Governors Association, these are the kind of conversations they encounter. Yes?
When you assess the successful transfer of a student, are you looking at a traditional 4-year university, or do you take it a step further and analyze the competitiveness, say like Ivy League versus a larger or smaller university?
Well, you can do any or all of that. The transfer process has not been well understood across America, and the National Student Clearinghouse, and if you're not aware of it, I hope you'll make a note of it, has done some really powerful research on what happens to community college students as they move forward. And they are tracking now students going to over 3,000 institutions, which includes public, private, elite, and state college. And it is a remarkable set of studies that they've just done and released in recent months. And so there's the ability to look at an entire state or look at an entire institution to see what's happening to your students in transfer. Just to give you a quick example, in the state of Texas, which leads the nation, by the way, in a look that the National Clearinghouse took at all baccalaureate graduates in the 2010-2011 fiscal year. So across the nation, looked at all 50 states to see of all those baccalaureates granted in the spring of 2011, how many of them started in a community college? And the answer in Texas was 79% of all baccalaureates granted in Texas in 2011 were students who had transferred from a community college in Texas. This is public and private. Now that leads the nation. And it drops down across the 50 states to something as low as 20-some-odd%. But movement from the community college to the university can be tracked through the National Student Clearinghouse. And it's a powerful source of data that might be of interest to you. Yes, Larry?
I think our number is about 48, 49%.
Okay.
Still a lot, but about middle of the pack.
Okay.
Yes. Casey, if I could kind of pitch this to you a little bit. I think that we here at council, I think I've heard you mention that there are 4 indicia of student success that we discussed here. I'm curious, I guess I'll hold the way, your reaction to the 3 here that are on the screen, and then if you could remind us about what our 4 are, I'd like to hear Byron's reaction to those.
We've actually used 3. We've used a 6-year time frame, and the 3 indicators that we look for are, did the student A, earn a degree or a certificate, B, transfer before earning a degree or certificate but make a successful transfer, or 3, accumulates 30 credits with a 2.0 GPA, making the student academically eligible to continue, but the assumption being that it was their choice, not ours, that they're no longer in school.
Is that part of kind of interwoven into our 8 Big Ideas project? Is that set?
Number 3.
Okay. All right, I'm going to move quickly through this next segment because I want to get Linda up here to share some New Jersey data just before we take off for dinner tonight. So you'll be ready, right? Okay. Let's take it just a step further and just tease you a little bit with the kind of studies that you might want to be thinking about as you think about your future. We've talked a bit about assessment, so I'm not going to dwell there. And Larry already talked about what I said to your student services folks this morning. The reality in the research that's been done by the Community College Research Center, and it's good research, is that if you take a cut score on an assessment test and look at those 10% above, and I'm making this up, it might be 7.5%, or it might be 6.9, or it might be 8.2, I don't recall exactly what it is, but I'm just going to use 10%. Above the cut score and 10% below the cut score, you're essentially talking about students who are comparable. In other words, they're questioning the precision of placing students on the basis of a single score, where if you get 1 point above, you're going to be out of developmental ed, and if you get 1 point below, you're going to be in developmental ed, thereby altering your trajectory toward a degree. And so the conversation around the land is that we've got to be careful about letting a single test score, with the assumption that it's very precise, determine the lives of those students to the extent that it does now affect their lives. So many colleges are beginning to look at that range, above and below, and beginning to say, can we put more students into college credit courses with special supports? And will they do as well as those who were above the cut score? And the answer tends to be, yes, they can be, just as successful. So think about that. Think about all those who test into developmental ed, and then think about whether or not, if they need remediation, they actually get it immediately. If they need it, they need it immediately. So the question is, do we require students to go through assessment, and then do we require placement based on assessment? And we find college after college all over the country where the answer is no. Students get the advice and they decide not to take it, and what then happens to them? So think about, as you think about your college and think about your future, knowing more about how students are moving into and through your institution. And if I can trust your student services folks, and I do, a majority of all your students coming in to New Jersey colleges need remediation. That was their assertion this morning. So if they need it, the question is, are they getting it immediately? And that's an answer you can know, and something that's worth tracking. Now look at semester course completion. A comparison that can be made is of those who took developmental courses, how did they do in semester course completion versus those who came in college ready? Or, given the element I just introduced, what if students are not mandated to take the developmental courses and they by themselves decide to take the college credit courses? Do they do as well as those who were college ready? So think about the ways that you can know whether or not students are getting what they need at the point of entry, and how do they then do? Similarly, follow them into the next term. fall to spring retention. Those in developmental, those not in developmental. And similarly, fall to fall, same kind of look that you might take. But the really important ingredient that I want to stress is the progression through whatever you do for developmental to the point of college readiness. How long does it take students to get there, and how do they then do in their first college credit courses, which is typically measured by their completion of these gateway courses that we've already talked about. So thinking about progression is the idea I want to plant with you. And I want to have a chance for Linda to kind of remind you of the kind of data that you've been collecting, and then I'll make a comment or two about that just before we break for dinner. So the two of us are standing between you and dinner, but it's an awfully important conversation.